This episode contains specific and graphic information about a crime. Please be advised.
She called for an Uber. There was a car circling, waiting to kidnap somebody. It happened to be my daughter. Samantha got in and she fought for her life, put up a struggle. The police called again and she goes, "What's your ETA?" I mumbled to myself, this is not going to end well. This is not good. What the hell did we ever do to deserve this? What did Samantha ever do?
Welcome to True Crime Prevention, the podcast that melds true crime with real solutions. Let's expose how all crime starts the same way, with a chance. Today, we won't give it a chance. I'm Paul Del Ponte, and I work with McGruff the Crime Dog. Thanks for joining us. On today's episode, we're going to take a close look at rideshare safety. How many times do we call it for an Uber or a Lyft or another rideshare, and we just get in without thinking about it? Well, it's important we do think about it. And we have with us here a parent who is sounding the alarm bell for people across the country about how do we take a ride share more safely. Sadly, Seymour Josephson lost his daughter several years ago that we'll get into some more of the details. But do me a favor right now, click like and subscribe and take a moment. And before we get started with Seymour, just take a quick break for our sponsor.
This episode is brought to you by Safely. When it comes to personal safety, prevention is power, and confidence is everything. That's where Safely comes in, a company founded by women for women, creating discreet, self-defense tools that fit right into your everyday life. Get empowered to take a bite out of crime with Safely products, like their best-selling Sidekick, an all-in-one safety device that combines pepper spray, an alarm, a flashlight, and a safety spike with a grip that secures it all to your hand. Safely wants you to do what you want, whenever you want, and to do it safely. So head to livesafely.co and use code PREVENTION for 10% off of your order. That's livesafely.co, code PREVENTION. Stay prepared, stay powerful, stay safely.
This episode is brought to you by me, McGruff the Crime Dog, America's favorite crime-preventing canine. Check out the brand new True Crime Prevention mug by visiting the McGruff shop. It's perfect for sipping morning coffee while listening to a new episode or preventing crime in your community. 100% of the profits support crime prevention programs. Shop the mug and much more, like t-shirts, hats, or toy cars at mcgruff.org. Use code TRUECRIMEPREVENTION for 25% off. Let's take a bite out of crime together.
Welcome back. And as I said, we're going to be talking with Seymour Josephson, who sadly lost his beautiful daughter, Samantha, a college student at the University of South Carolina. And they sent her down from lovely Mercer County, New Jersey, where the family lived and Sami grew up. Welcome to the podcast, Seymour. Thank you for joining us and looking forward to helping others understand what's going on. So thank you again for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Great to be here. So as I mentioned, why don't you start by, I just hate just to talk and frame people just for their last day in their life. Why don't you start by telling us a little bit about Sami, some of the happy times and her growing up and the kind of person she was.
So Sami, excuse me, I got choked up already. So
Sure.
Samantha was my youngest daughter. She was typically one of the younger ones in our neighborhood, in the group of families that we all hung together. She was probably the funniest of the kids. Always had a quick wit humor, was very sarcastic like me. But she had a ton of friends growing up. She played, she played travel soccer. She played AAU basketball. She did all these things, and she was not, and I preface this, she was not a great athlete. But she did it because of all of her friends were doing it. And what she brought to the team was that togetherness, the funniness, the lightness, and not making it so serious. And all the kids loved her because of that. She might have been one of the tallest kids at the time of growing up, but she was a kid that was just funny, clumsy at times, where she broke her elbow and her wrist, one elbow and one arm, her wrist and her other arm, and fell off a scooter. So she was just a funny, lighthearted, great kid who grew up into a very smart young adult. And people, even neighbors and our best friends, and probably even Jenna, did not realize how smart Samantha was, because I don't think Samantha knew how smart she was until when she got into college and she started getting ready for law school. When she was studying for her LSATs, she was kind of embarrassed of how smart she was. She had a full scholarship to law school in Philadelphia, Drexel. She had probably 60-70% scholarship to Rutgers Law, and her friends were like, "What are you doing? Where are you going? Why are you flying home all of a sudden?" Whoops. And she had to tell people. She had to tell her friends that she had a scholarship and they were flying her home for new student orientation. So she was a kind of embarrassed by those type of things, because everybody looked at her as being the comedian, the lightheartedness. Oh, that's just Sami, and we have videos of her as a little kid down here at the beach and eating a popsicle and melting on the beach, and she started crying, and what happened? She goes to pick it up and ready to eat it off the sand. So it's just the comedian part, and everybody remembers her as that type of kid. Some people joke through life, and she was that type of kid where she did that, and a lot of the people didn't realize how brilliant, how smart, and how sharp she was.
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing that. And, I mean, I'm sure I myself, who just sent a child off to college a short time ago, very much relate to that story. And the next part is the hard part. Every parent's nightmare. So, as I said, this involves a ride share. Like so many of us, we call for an Uber. We don't give it a second thought. We get in the car, and that's what Sami did, except not so much. Tell us what happened.
So, again, the weekend before she was home, she went back on that Monday. Thursday, they were all out celebrating, and her roommates, because she told them finally that she had a full scholarship and that she
Sure.
was going to law school. So they were all out celebrating and partying, and she was at a bar, and she had to work the next morning because she worked when she was in college for her spending money. And she actually left the bar early from her roommates because of going back to her apartment. So she called for an Uber, and you could see on all the videos that are out there that there was a car circling and then off to the left-hand side in the parking lot waiting to kidnap somebody or do something to somebody. But it happened to be my daughter. He saw her go to one Uber. It wasn't hers. That one pulled away. She went back to the curb. 10 seconds later, that car pulled right up, jumped the curb, pulled right in front of Samantha in a handicapped spot. Samantha got in, and they said probably within 2 miles of her being picked up, everything happened, where she fought for her life, put up a struggle, and then they found her 65 miles away in the Low Country, where this guy lived a mile away in the woods. And we were notified that next morning by Samantha's boyfriend, Greg, that Samantha's missing. He had called Marcy, my wife, her mother, and Marcy was at school. She was a speech and language therapist at a school there in Mercer County. And Marcy called me. She goes, "Did you speak to Greg?" And I said, "No." And she told me what happened. I said, "Get home. We're going down." It was just, it wasn't, it was very unusual for Marcy not to speak to the girls that every morning. She spoke by text, "Good morning, have a great day, love you." And the girls always responded back, both of them. And if Marcy did not text that day, they would call back and say, "What's going on? Why aren't you texting me?" So very close relationship with Marcy and myself, but with Marcy. Um, and called work where she was. She didn't show up. So that's why one of the other reasons why we automatically jumped into the car and started driving down. We were talking to the police. I was talking to the police probably for the first 2 hours of the drive. Probably for the first 45 minutes at home, waiting for Marcia to get home. And then
And this is going from New Jersey to
from New
South
Jersey
Carolina.
down to South
Yeah.
Carolina. And then on and off periodically, I would be speaking to the South Carolina Police Department, where they'd be like checking in. "What's your ETA? What's your ETA?" And I would say probably, I don't know, a little bit more than halfway, probably someplace in Virginia. We had stopped to get a cup of coffee, and the police called again, and she goes, "What's your ETA?" And at that point, it was like the second or third time at that point, when we hung up the phone, I mumbled to myself, I said the F word, and I said, "This is not going to end well. This is not good." And Marcy goes, "What?" I said, "Nothing. No, nothing. I'm just mumbling to myself." I just had a sick feeling. And, meanwhile, I'm driving 90 miles an hour, trying to get down there as fast as I can. So it only took me 10 hours instead of 11, 12 hours. And when we got to South Carolina, we went right to the police station, and they brought us into a conference room. They had people sitting at a table, some police officers. They actually had a coroner there with a jacket, which he's not the sharpest tool in the shed. And at that point, I started to put all the pieces together, and that's when they told Marcy and I. And at the same time, Marcy's roommate and boyfriend, Samantha's boyfriend and roommates came to the station, and they put him into separate rooms to start interviewing them.
Oh.
And then a couple hours, hour and a half later, whatever, 2 hours later, they brought them in, and we had to tell them.
Well, again, my sympathies, and as I said, as a parent, I can't even begin to fathom that 10-hour drive and walking in that room. And
It was horrible, horrible. And I would say actually probably the hardest phone call I ever had to make was in that between time when I was sitting at the table and waiting for her roommates to come in. We had to call back home to Sydney
yeah.
and she was with our next door neighbors, and my cousins were there, some of my cousins and my sister. And I could just hear everybody screaming,
Wow.
and shrieking, and falling to the ground. So that was not a pleasurable night.
And as you're living this,
Reliving it now.
reliving it, and I commend you for helping, because what we're really aiming to do is help others.
And that's one reason I'm sitting here.
Yeah. So you're absorbing this information, and I don't even think there's a way anybody can humanly absorb it in the span of time you have. You may hear it, but you certainly can't process it.
Correct.
Then when did you start learning details of the crime? In terms of the capture of the assailant?
Yeah. So, so when we got there, obviously they were pretty sure that they found her. They couldn't 100% guarantee us that they found her because there was turkey farmers hunters that found her in the woods. She was so brutally killed that they really couldn't identify her. There were some scars, and there was some clothing, and some things that we had to give to the coroner and to the police. And at that time, we knew that what bar she was at, and some of, I think Samantha's boyfriend and one of her roommates were friends with the manager of the bar, and they wanted to get the camera footage from that. So I know that they went and asked the kids that, and they ran out of the room, because otherwise they would have to get a search warrant, right? And at that point, it was all hands on deck, and so I know that they went to them, and then they actually got the footage of the camera and of her getting into the car, and they had it on their phone. So it was the next day. It was I guess that Friday night that he came back. That Friday night, the next night, and they had a baller out for that type of car because they saw her getting into the car from the footage that they had from the bar. So they had a baller out in South Carolina, North Carolina, and he came back around, and that's when the police had caught him. But we didn't get that. So we were there, I think basically Friday morning, Thursday night, from then to Tuesday or Wednesday. And we were getting periodical updates where the chief would come in and tell us as a group, because we ended up having about 20 people fly down and come up from Atlanta, Marcy's sister. We had all of our friends and cousins come down, and we had a conference room where he gave us an update, the chief. And at one of those updates, that's when they said that somewhat of what transpired. And because we were staying at one of the hotels there as a group, and I'm trying to just remember periodically through this. And
Sure.
I know that at one point I asked to speak or to meet the police officer that captured the guy, because they were pretty sure that that's who it was, because they found her phone, keys, and some other stuff in the car of Samantha's. So I would guess it was probably a Monday that we met the police officers. And then I know they also had a hearing, a bond hearing for him that Monday or Tuesday that we all went to, and that at least I was hoping that he was going to be at, that he was not. So
Right.
it was periodical. We were getting all that different information and trying to put it all together. And I know before we left, we met with the solicitors, the head solicitors and the the second commands and so forth. We all met as a group with him,
Mhm.
with them, not him, but with Byron, Dan, April, and we were getting information, ongoing information all throughout of,
Good.
I don't want to say details, but what transpired from capturing him. He came around, he was targeting, um, but at one point I know that we were not allowed to identify her to confirm that it was her, because it was so brutally
Mm.
bad. So I know
Right.
we had to have a conversation over a phone and Marcy's like, all right, she had a rash here, then she had something on her knee here, and then this here, birthmark here. Bless her, she memorizes every body marking on both of the kids, from growing up.
Yeah. Well, a couple things. One, I'm thankful for you that you had such a strong support network around you, as you're recounting these very, very tough details. I'm sure having that support network made all the difference, and I'm glad you had it there for you. Um,
Yes.
and you are, like I said, you're hearing this, but there's no way any parent can logically make sense of it at the time. Is that, I mean, I can't imagine how I could. I can't imagine how anyone could. Is what are you thinking while you're sitting there and you're hearing one worse thing after another, essentially?
Can't believe that it's my daughter.
Right.
Can't believe that this is happening to us. saying, what the hell did we ever do to deserve this? What did Samantha ever do? She wanted to go to law school to help people.
Yeah.
You know,
And doing something intuitive. You got a full scholarship. Your first instinct is let's celebrate.
right,
It's certainly worth celebrating,
right.
for sure. And then
And then
tragedy strikes.
being responsible of calling a car and not driving or walking.
Right, exactly. And you think everything is going to be okay because you made the right decisions. So as more information came forward, and um, eventually there was a prosecution, is that correct?
Yes, yeah. So it took a couple years, and I don't think I fully processed anything or everything for an extreme amount of time. And I don't probably remember half to three quarters of everything that transpired um, from that and during it and during the trial. I remember bits and pieces.
Did in the process, how were the police? How were the prosecutors? Were they understanding, diligent?
Yeah. So for they they did an outstanding job, both the police and the solicitors, the prosecutors. I've actually have become pretty good friends with one Dan Goldberg, who led the case, who was the second in charge. We've become pretty good friends where we stay in contact. Um,
And the prosecution was successful.
yeah, we wanted the death penalty. I wanted the death penalty, I should say. I wanted him to suffer as much as Samantha, if not more. But they said that we would never be able to get it because of where it was located and the county and so forth. So yes, we did go for he's prosecuted and he's in life in prison without parole. The last few years we've had to deal with some appeals that he's been
Right.
struck down on, and we've had to go back a couple times that we've gone for that process. The three of us, um, which is always hard, and we're always waiting for the
Right.
next
It's almost
appeal.
another reliving. Yeah.
Yeah.
So then something happened. You decided to do something
Yeah.
beyond this to help
Yeah.
others. Tell us the moment in time where you said, damn it, I got to do something.
Yeah. It's, I don't know the moment, but I know that, so there was two vigils. One vigil down in South Carolina that they asked me to come up and speak to all the kids and everybody that was there. So I did that. Then there was another vigil back at home where our mayor, Dave Reed, and I were talking, and he goes, "You have a platform. You need to talk. You have this opportunity." And I'm like, "No." And we actually fought for about 20 minutes, um, going back and forth and fighting about it. And because we're actually good friends too. And he's like, "You've got to do this." And literally walking up to the vigil and walking out, we're still going back and forth, back and forth. And then finally I said yes. And it was just, I guess, at that moment of trying to help others. And when I was saying it, when I was standing and talking, um, and then more and more, like when we went on Good Morning America and some of these other platforms, I said to my wife, I said, and she didn't want to do it. She just wanted to crawl up in a ball and hide. I said, this is, they say you have this 15 minutes of fame or whatever. This is our 15 minutes. Let's do something. Let's make a difference.
Well, you're certainly making a difference, and that is giving extra meaning to Sami's life. Maybe you're channeling that inner lawyer inside of her and bringing justice. But what we like to say at the National Crime Prevention Council is it really takes a community. It is the community involvement that stops crime. It doesn't matter
is.
where you are.
And I'm just one voice, and I'm trying to bring awareness and education and the reality, right, of
Right.
how bad it is. And if you look at the reports from Uber, from like the New York Times has published, every 8 minutes there's a sexual abuse happening. There's some kind of crime happening
Wow.
in an Uber every 8 minutes. Um, you know, I looked at it as saying, if I could just help one person, I'm good. But you don't realize how bad it actually is. And you think that the companies are doing their due diligence of doing background checks and doing everything to be safe. And until I got involved and started doing this, and Jenna, who will follow this up, I'm quite sure she didn't realize how bad and how truly the rideshare industry is horrible. And that's why we're trying to do a federal law, of driving this from the
Yep.
top down and not just go from the bottom up. And we'll continue to educate, continue to bring awareness, but there has to be legislation around there, because we teach our kids don't talk to strangers and don't get in cars with strangers. And that's
Right.
exactly what we're doing. And we're
McGruff
thinking
has been
that
doing that his whole career.
Uber and Lyft, and there's actually over 60 rideshare companies in North America, over 60, not just Uber and Lyft. And we think that they're doing the right thing. And unless the government steps in and uses these laws and creates these laws, people, and to put legislation around these companies, it's the wild, wild west. And I've told
Absolutely. And
all of them that.
And we're glad you did. We are here to support families and victims like yourselves in that push. And we'll have more information on that. And you even went beyond that. You set up a group, helped set up a group, and we're going to bring on Jenna, who you've alluded to shortly, to talk more about that. But it's What's My Name, which is not only the name of the group, but is the key phrase everyone should use when they're about to step into what they think is a rideshare.
Yeah.
If the driver can't answer what your name is, they're not legit.
And they don't get in the car. And everything
Don't get in the car.
Right. And everything that Jenna's going to talk about is before you get into the car, right?
Right.
That's one component of this. And that's why we're trying to create federal laws around this.
Around that.
Yes.
And so did Uber ever reach out to you and offer condolences, solutions?
So they did. In the beginning, I had conversations with Dara from Uber, multiple conversations with him. I've had multiple conversations with the former CEO of Lyft, John Zimmer. And then, they're very kind to you, to your face. And then when we start doing the federal law, even the head of legislation, they're very kind to you. And then they go behind your back and will send letters and spend $3 million lobbying against you, which that's exactly what they did.
That is a story all too familiar. But well, we're there, and we've talked about Jenna. We're going to bring her on shortly. Again, make sure you click like and subscribe, and head your way over to the McGruff shop. You can get a mug and some other nice things. And we thank you, Seymour, from the bottom of my heart and from whatever sympathy I can share over screen. I just want to reach out and hug you and your support network around you, and just urge you to keep going. There are going to be tough days where it's going to seem like you're rolling a boulder uphill and you're not making a difference, but you are. Your story got through. It's getting through. It's getting through every day. This will get the word out more. And thank you for joining us. And I want to introduce Jenna Zangrilli, and who joins us, and she is boosting the work of What's My Name and turning it into a real operation. And I've got to say how impressed I am looking at the work you've done. You've got a slew of public service announcements, and knowing what it takes to put one of those together, you've accomplished so much in a short period of time. Congratulations on that. and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So tell us your connection and how things got going with the foundation.
Sure. So I actually grew up right next door to the Josephsons. I've lived next to them since I was little, and I actually babysat for both of their children, Sydney and Samantha. Yeah. So I've known them for a very long time. Obviously, when everything happened, we were very close by with their family. Seymour and Marcy and my parents are very, very close. So when Seymour and Marcy started the What's My Name Foundation, and it actually all started, it was my birthday, and they were going on Good Morning America in the morning the next day, and they said they didn't have, I guess, anything set up to point people to for additional resources. And me just having a marketing background and knowing how to do these things, I stayed up till 3 o'clock in the morning and created a makeshift website for them so that they had something to point people to on their interview. So it kind of started there, and then just volunteering with them a little bit along the way throughout the past couple years. With my background in marketing, I was able to help them, get videographers for the PSAs, even though they sourced all of those celebrities and personalities themselves. But I was kind of there to help them with like the little nitty gritty stuff. And then about a year ago, Seymour and Marcy asked me if I wanted to come on full time and help them with the foundation. So I've been doing that for the past year.
Well, terrific. And it goes to the point I was making earlier about community.
Yeah.
So there you are in New Jersey, next door neighbors, babysitter. You can't get more community involvement than that.
Yeah.
And now next morning, you're on Good Morning America on a website that you developed overnight. And now you've got national legislation. You've got McGruff on your side. You've got, you're making momentum every day. Tell us a little bit about how that was like, sort of seeing this grow from an idea to something that's, you look at it now and you say, it's real.
Yeah. I mean, it's been really great in a also very sad way. It's
Right.
upsetting that something like that, like the What's My Name Foundation even has to exist. But from being behind the scenes for now the past 6 years, it's pretty incredible to see, one, that people don't realize the dangers of ride sharing. First and foremost, it's not something that's talked about a lot. We all were brought up in school being spoken to about drunk driving and all of that, but we created this new industry that's now superbly more popular, and the safety aspect of it isn't talked about as much. So that's one component of it that was really interesting, that this isn't a known thing. And then the other point is just seeing how many people Marcy and Seymour have helped. I obviously get access to all of the emails, and I'm running their social media. So hearing back from people saying that they always ask, what's my name, or telling us stories about how they got out of a bad situation because of things that they learned throughout our foundation. I mean, that's the most important thing, is that we're getting that direct feedback that we're actually helping others.
Now, one thing I noticed, you use Sammy's name as an abbreviation for the key things people should know, be aware of, and ask. Why don't you quickly go over Sammy?
Yeah, great. So we actually have signs that say this. They're all over New Jersey, but they're spread out throughout airports nationwide and different bars and restaurants, which is really cool to see. But the acronym is SAMI, which is Samantha's nickname, and it stands for Stop, Ask, Match, and Inform. So before you get into the car, stop to make sure that the license plate, the make and model of the car match the description that's in your rideshare app. Always ask, what's my name, before you get into the car. And that's that the driver has to confirm your name with you so that you can see that it says it in their app. If I walk up to a car and say, are you picking up Jenna? They could say yes or no without any form of identification. Next is match, which again is to match all of the information within the app to the actual car itself. And then inform, which is to use the safety feature in the Uber and Lyft apps to actually inform someone of your ride and have them follow along with you as you're riding, especially if you're by yourself.
Very helpful guidance and very simple things that everyone can do. A lot of people are unaware. You take certain things for granted, but that's why we're here, to inform people, let them know, and keep them safer. Tell us a little bit more about the legislation.
Sure. So Seymour and Marcy worked on the legislation before I was involved, but they got Sammy's Law passed in New Jersey already, which requires ride shares to have 2 points of identification on the car. So basically, you'd have like almost like a license, but it's a piece of paper on one part of the car, and then identification that you actually are an Uber or Lyft on the other part of the car, like a light up sign that you see in a lot of ride shares. So Sammy's Law passed on a New Jersey level, so that is active now. The drivers are required to have these 2 points of identification, and those identifiers also have a QR code that you could scan from your phone just to confirm that it is legit. The next step of that was to turn Sammy's Law into a federal bill, which that has 4 different components to it. The digital verification, which requires the companies to actually have you opt out of the PIN feature. So if you're familiar with the current safety feature in Uber where you could turn on a verification PIN so the driver can't start the ride until you verify the PIN with them. That right now is opt in. You have to go into your settings and turn that on. But the Sammy's Law federal bill will require that to be opt out so that it's automatically set for everyone. The next part of it is it would ban others from creating fake rideshare signs. So right now you can go on Amazon and for like $20, you could just buy a light up sign that says Uber or Lyft and stick that in your car. This would ban the production and distribution of that. The third part is a GAO study, which they did do already, although Uber and Lyft opted not to self-report data on incidences for the study. So it really didn't tell us a whole lot. But that's the third part of the bill is that they'd be required to report fatal and non-fatal incidences like sexual and physical assaults. And then the fourth part would be a council to develop standards. So an actual government council that would create higher standards for rideshare safety and the drivers.
Good. Well, and we will post information online that people can go to, the bill details and that kind of thing, and voice their support. I'm going to ask, given sort of the conversation with Seymour and his sentiments toward the rideshare companies, is probably a rhetorical question. But to me, it doesn't sound like there's anything in this bill that these companies can't do tomorrow on their own.
Yes, and as you've already talked to Seymour, and if you talk to Seymour, he will tell you exactly that. It's very hard to understand why these companies aren't already doing that, especially the PIN verifications. I mean, I don't see how that's a nuisance to users. I have to do it every time I order Uber Eats to order food to my doorstep, but I don't have to do it when my physical person is inside of a car. Like it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. We're just
It doesn't make sense. And like I said, you go household to household, neighbor to neighbor, and we spread the word. And it is going to be ultimately be public pressure that does this. And the companies will start to realize they need to act. It's maybe corporate responsibility is something that used to be fashionable. We need to make it fashionable again. I think that is a big part of it. So you were a marketer by profession and you switched into the realm of public advocacy, working for a cause. How has that changed your life and given more meaning to your days?
I mean, it definitely feels nice to be helping others. This is a topic that I feel like I'm using my marketing powers for the betterment of society and for good. But it really was a very interesting match because basically what our foundation does is spread awareness. And in marketing, I work specifically as a social media marketer. That's what my goals were anyway, was to spread awareness. So I've been able to do that now with a topic that I feel like is more fulfilling, especially having a personal tie to the family. Like I said, I grew up with them. Seymour and Marcy were like second parents to me. We come from a very, very tight knit community, and especially Seymour mentioned it, but our neighborhood was very, very close. So to be able to help them and help others nationwide and hopefully internationally at this point, I feel like I'm using all of my marketing powers for good.
Well, and you've got some good ammunition and some good allies on your side, an impressive list of celebrities, Bob Saget, Jason Alexander, and it looks like about a dozen more or so just helping the cause. What's that been like to work with them to get that kind of involvement to help get the message out there?
Yeah, it was pretty amazing. Seymour and Marcy had a lot of really awesome. I feel like New Jersey in and of itself is a very tight community. Whenever, someone has contacts or can help out, it's pretty crazy to see how quickly people are willing to get involved. So Seymour and Marcy had really, really great contacts to be able to get in touch with those celebrities and get them on board to be advocates. So that's been amazing. I was solely involved in kind of like the video editing process of it, but it's really cool to see, as we're reposting those PSAs from a few years ago, just the sort of engagement that they're getting because we're able to reach people that we wouldn't have reached ourselves.
Exactly. Well, Bruce Springsteen talks about having a Jersey style house party. So I guess that's what he means.
It is just like that.
Well, and actually, a recent story was at a conference, and the Attorney General and Deputy Attorney General from New Jersey were there and got talking. And the Deputy Attorney General, she grew up, and her uncle had a McGruff figure in his basement
No.
from back in the day. And so we were talking, and very much like you said, you make connections. We will be, and we'll have to invite you when this happens in Seymour and all your other supporters. We're going to do something with McGruff and Trenton. Don't know when and where yet exactly, but we're definitely going to include you, and also want to include you in something else that we're launching. It's called McGruff's Prevention Posse. It is people who are on social media, who are aware of the many dangers on social media and rideshare apps and all this other things, to spread out the word. So when you have information about something one of the rideshare companies might not be doing right or could be doing right, we're recruiting an army of people who are going to go on social media. And when we say go, they're going to post like crazy. And if it means the companies get embarrassed, it means the companies get embarrassed. If it means some people are safer the next day, definitely people are going to be safer the next day. So it is all about spreading the word and getting people, community to community, person to person, to pitch in and help. What else should people know before they get on a rideshare?
So a few things that are not included in our Sami steps. Number one is before you get into the car to make sure that the child safety locks aren't engaged. Before I had children myself, I didn't even really know that child safety locks were a thing. So checking the side of the door to make sure that it's flipped to unlocked, because unfortunately in Samantha's case, the child safety locks were engaged in the car, so she was unable to get out when things went wrong. The other thing is, especially for females, if you're traveling alone, the best place to sit in the car is directly behind the driver. It actually gives them the least amount of physical access to you. So you want to sit directly behind them. You definitely do not want to sit in the front of the car, but behind the driver in the back seat. And then lastly, this is unfortunately a trend that we've been hearing a lot, especially coming out of university towns, is unfortunately people, and mostly women, getting drugged in the back seat of ride shares. So never, ever, ever take anything that a rider, a drink, any food, any of the little mints some of them have in the baskets. Do not take anything. I always say, you wouldn't accept a water bottle from a stranger off of the street. Why would you accept one from a stranger that you're getting into a car with? So do not eat or drink anything that's given to you in an Uber. And if possible, just try not to travel alone. But I know working, it's hard, but
sure. Good advice, good tips for our listeners and viewers. We have another episode which focuses more specifically on that issue you just raised. Again, another tragedy and another set of parents who've come forward to stop tragedy in the future. So it really is a heroic effort that's going on out there. Our only regret is that these companies are tone deaf to hearing the calls to make their platform safer. Something they can do, something Uber can do tomorrow is switch that ID from opt-in to opt-out. It's not going to cost them any money. It's, I question why say no to something like that would keep your own customers safer. And it just makes one wonder why. But again, a pleasure to have you. The name of the organization is What's My Name? You can find them online. You can find posters. You can find celebrities talking about them. And the one important thing for our listeners to do, spread the word. Jenna, thank you for joining us. It was great to have you. And To Seymour, I thank you. What you're doing really is tremendous, and we commend you for it.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having us.
Great to be with you. And for our viewers and listeners, click that like and subscribe. Keep our podcast going. And thanks for helping us take a bite out of crime.
That's an easy way to take a bite out of crime.